Welcome to the show. Lee, I want to start with a driveway. Not the cottage, not the orchard, not the sunset over the paddock, the driveway. Because I have seen buyers stand on a gorgeous lifestyle block, absolutely smitten, and only later ask, hang on, do we actually own the access?
Do we actually own the access? Is the sort of sentence that should be asked before people pick curtain colors. And yet, the view gets them every time. The hill, the trees, the sheep in the distance. It's like a Hallmark movie with survey pegs.
Exactly. Rural buyers fall in love with the picture first, then the property starts talking back. The title says one thing, the easement says another, the neighbor says, oh, we've always used that track, and suddenly your dream block is a legal jigsaw. A good rural agent has to slow the romance down and ask the unsexy questions early.
Wait, grab unsexy questions. Give me the first three. If I'm an urban buyer coming out of Auckland or Wellington, what do I not know to ask?
Access, water, boundary, in that order usually. How do you get in and out on paper and in practice? Where does the water come from? Tank, bore, stream, scheme, and is it reliable? And where does the boundary actually run? Not where the fence appears to run, because fences lie.
Fences lie. That's memorable. I'm keeping that one. But let's stay on boundary for a second. You're saying the fence line and the legal boundary can be different enough to matter?
Oh, absolutely. Buyers assume fence equals boundary because in town, often enough, that's close. In rural property, not always. You can have an old fence put up for stock management, not legal precision. Then the buyer starts planning a shed or a tiny orchard or thinks they control a creek edge, and the title plan tells a different story. That is why I want agents saying, let's check the title, let's check the easements, let's check the deposited plan.
And then we get to the phrase that frightens civilians: unformed road. Because that sounds quaint, like a country lane. It is not quaint, is it?
No, it is not quaint. An unformed road can mean legal access exists, but the practical reality is muddy, steep, unusable, or costly to improve. So if a buyer hears, yes, there's legal access, and imagines a normal drive in all seasons, they're filling in facts that no one actually said. Agents must separate legal access from practical access.
That's the key distinction right there: legal versus practical. It's like having a right to land a plane in a paddock versus having a runway. Technically interesting, operationally terrifying.
That is a very you analogy, but yes. And shared drives add another layer. Who maintains it? Who can widen it? Who parks on it? Is there an easement document spelling out rights and obligations? Or is everybody relying on a handshake from 1998?
1998. That's the year that sticks because half of rural conflict seems to begin with, we've always done it this way since 1998, and nobody wrote it down.
Correct. And while we're being honest, lifestyle buyers can over romanticize the country dream. They imagine chickens, a veggie patch, maybe a few alpacas, and they don't picture septic maintenance, water tank cleaning, pump failures, boundary disputes, or the cost of replacing a gate after one stormy weekend.
I partly agree, but I don't want agents becoming dream killers. The dream matters. People are not buying contour maps for fun. They're buying a life, fresh air, space, maybe a home business. Surely the answer isn't to bludgeon them with worst case scenarios.
No, not bludgeon. Translate, that's the job. I am not anti dream. Good heavens, I've sold property on 3 continents. I know aspiration sells. But credibility comes from protecting the buyer from the parts they can't see. If you don't raise the septic system, the tank water, the easement over the neighbor's land, the boundary fence condition, somebody else will, and much later, much more painfully.
So the rural agent becomes what? A kind of preemptive reality coach?
I'll take that. A reality coach with a title search habit. And this matters for agents too, because in smaller communities, your reputation travels faster than your listings do. If you let a buyer walk blindly into access trouble or water trouble, people remember.
And buyers remember the moment the dream got expensive, usually at the due diligence stage, usually after they've emotionally moved in.
Yes, so slow them down before they emotionally build the deck. Ask, show me the title, explain the easements, confirm the water source, inspect the septic setup, identify the boundary markers, ask about roading, and don't forget plain old boundary fences. If stock can get through, neighbors can get cranky very quickly.
Let me come at this from the market side, because this is where generic advice goes to die. In a city suburb, people love broad slogans: up and coming, great buying, strong demand. But in a rural pocket, two properties 5 minutes apart can behave like two different planets. Yes?
Absolutely, yes. One has reliable tank water, decent contour, workable sheds, and a school run families can live with. The other has patchy access in winter, no fiber, expensive maintenance, and land that looks bigger on paper than it feels underfoot. Same district, very different value story.
You slipped in school run and fiber there. That's exactly the sort of local token people miss. Fiber matters. School zones matter. Contractor availability matters. If the local drain layer or fencer is booked out for months, that's not trivia. That's the buyer's first year.
Thank you. And seasonal road conditions matter too. A road that's fine in January may be another thing entirely in a wet winter. Buyers from the main centers often don't realize how much daily livability shapes value. Can you get the kids to school? Can you work from home reliably? Is there a sensible split between the home and the income use if the buyer wants that?
Let me try to explain it back. You're saying a lifestyle block is not one asset, it's a stack of systems, land quality, improvements, services, access, and then this softer layer of local practicality: schooling, roads, trades, connectivity. And if an agent only says beautiful rural retreat, they've described almost none of the value.
That's exactly right. And comparables can fool you. In a smaller market, you might have only a handful of recent sales. But if you don't understand contour, soil usefulness, water reliability, improvements, and actual buyer depth in that exact pocket, those sales can mislead more than they help.
Buyer depth in that exact pocket, that's the phrase, because a comp from 10 kilometers away may be statistically tempting and commercially useless. 10 kilometers in the country can be a universe. Different road, different school appeal, different micro market, different everything.
Yes, and this is where agent credibility gets earned. Not by sounding grand, not by using generic market slogans, by saying, here's what's sold, here's why it's sold, here's how this one differs, and here are the risks I want you to understand before you commit. That is grown up agency.
There's also a psychological piece. In smaller centers, people assume local knowledge is somehow casual, just neighborly chat. But actually, it's a professional asset. Knowing which contractor returns calls, which roads flood, which pockets have stronger buyer demand, that's market intelligence.
And it keeps deals alive. The best advice I can give agents working outside the main centers is simple: set expectations early, document every risk, and use your local relationships. If access is shared, document it. If water is tank only, say so clearly. If the septic system is older, surface that. If the comparables are thin, explain the limits of the evidence instead of pretending certainty.
Pretending certainty, there's the trap. Then an agent who sounds sure of everything in a market where everyone local knows things are nuanced.
Exactly. Buyers do not need perfection from an agent. They need honesty, process, and local context. The best rural agents are translators between aspiration and reality. They keep the dream intact by making sure it stands on facts.
So maybe the country dream is fine. As long as the driveway exists, the water runs, the septic works, the fence is where the title says it is, and the peaceful lane isn't an unformed road to nowhere.
That's right. Sell the dream if you like, just make sure it survives daylight. See you next time.